Hello YouTube, the title of this video is probably a little bit exaggerated, and I just want to remind everyone that just because I'm disappointed doesn't automatically make a character bad. To be honest, I probably had too high expectation of Scaramouche coming in, since he was one of the coolest characters debuted in the initial Genshin 1.1 patch in the very first visual event. And then when we review that he actually gonna be a anemo character instead, we still have really high expectation, as anemo is one of the stronger element in the entire game, and with him having really cool animation, elemental burst, and how his kit can fly, maybe I had too much expectation of him that he turned out to just be a little disappointment for me. With that being said, here's my overall first impression coming into the first day of Scaramouche, or now named Wander. Starting off with the most important thing that people probably cared about. Yeah, he can fly. His elemental skill will generate additional resources, kind of like a stamina system that will then allow you to maneuver around, similar to, well, flying around. During his elemental skill state, you can spend this wind favor state to kind of fly around, or you can even just gain vertical height by using the spacebar instead. It is definitely really fun to travel around him. Unfortunately, his flying duration is kind of low, and do know that you cannot use this mid-air, so you can only use this while on the ground. Kazuha and Xiao elemental skill can be used mid-air though. Honestly, when I first picked up Scaramouche, it was really fun and really enjoyable. The flying capability was really cool, and being able to attack in the air was also really cool. However, when I finally took him to the Spiral Abyss to actually test out the character's combat string, I was met with nothing but frustration when I actually tried to play him. So here's my actual first impression when I come down to playing Scaramouche in the Genshin Impact combat mode, Spiral Abyss. And as always, if you're enjoying content like this, don't forget to subscribe. Let's get started. Starting off, Scaramouche is mostly played as a hyper carry in a team like this, where you run him with Faruzan, Bennett, and then a last flexible slot, something like Zhongli or a crowd characters. The reason why you run Bennett and a crowd character is because his A1 talent allow you to gain additional stat on Scaramouche by soaring those elements. Soaring Pyro give you 30% attack increase, and soaring crowd allow you to give 20 crit rate increase, which is a lot. At the current moment, at the recording of this video, my Scaramouche have 75 critical rate with 220 crit damage, and I'm also running a R5 Wisp, which is a really good 4-star Callus weapon. I'm running 2-piece VV, 2-piece Gladiator as my artifact, as unfortunately I don't have the brand new artifact set yet since the patch just came out. To be honest though, even though my stat is not the greatest and my artifact are not that good, I expected his damage to be a lot higher with what I have. Overall, in my playtest, I found his damage to be really underwhelming, potentially because I don't have the right artifact set. Yeah, potentially because my Faruzan, which is his main support, is not Constellation 6 yet, in which case it'll gain a lot of damage boost. But just like other first impression video, let's not be too over focused on damage, but rather let's take a look at the character kit itself and to see if the kit itself have any problem. We'll do a deeper dive into damage in the follow-up video coming up next week for the Is Wander meta video. When we have better calculation, when people get better artifact, the damage will slowly reveal itself. Coming into playing Wander in the Spiral Abyss, he just felt so squishy and so vulnerable to the damage. Yeah, the flying gimmick is cool, but it's honestly just not really practical at all. You can easily get hit even if you're in the air, and it's actually worse when you get hit in the air because you get knocked further back. The enemy can chain combo and knock you around all in the air, and they can essentially juggle you and not let you get a chance to recover at all. And yeah, while you can dodge mid-air, it actually will consume your wind favorite bar, which is directly tied to the duration of your elemental skill. So you really don't want to do that because it will essentially shorten how long you can stay in your hover state, which means how much damage you can dish out. And while his A4 talent allow you to occasionally get a dash in without consuming any of your resources, the thing that about his A4 talent is that it is RNG to proc. Every single time you normal attack, you have a 16% chance to obtain the effect. So sometimes you just don't really have the free dashes when you really need to dodge. In addition to that, even if you do get lucky, it is still about a dash every 3 to 5 seconds rather than having it on demand. So sometimes you just don't really have a choice at all. I also found it really hard to consistently and reliably check if I have the status effect on me at any given moment or not. Yeah, there is like a flashing light on your back and there's a ding sound whenever you do get the effect, but it's kind of hard to notice in the middle of battle, and therefore sometimes I found myself dashing without actually having the effect up, thinking that I have it, and it feels really terrible to dash in that state because that loses you a huge chunk of the win favorite resources, and it just feels really bad. There is just something super frustrating about trying to dodge in mid-air with Scaramouche elemental skills. There are so many times where you think you have the passive up, and then you dodge, and then well, it eat a huge chunk of your stamina bar, and you feel bad. Or other times there are attacks that look like it wouldn't really be hitting you, it shouldn't really be connecting to you, but it end up hitting you anyway, and you didn't dodge. And so because of that, you get knocked back super far, or maybe you get chain knocked back, maybe you get one shot by comboed by the enemy, and it's just super frustrating to play. And yeah, you can maneuver around in your hover state to kind of kite the enemy around or help you dodge a little bit better or position yourself a little bit better. But the problem with your hover state is that, well, you move so slow that the enemy is gonna catch up to you and attack you like normal anyway. And if you're running Scaramouche with Bennett, which you will be for a majority of the time, then you're still restricted to staying on Bennett Elemental Burst to play Circle Impact, which means the amount of area that you can actually move around is not that big. Essentially, Wander suffered the same syndrome as Yoimiya, which is, even though you have Bennett as a healer, you are still forced to bring a shooter just to make the character itself a little bit more reliable. So in general, your 4th slot is looking to be something like Zhongli, or you can bring a crowd shooter like Fiona or Layla in order to trigger the crowd soar passive as well. And it does kind of feels bad to bring a additional defensive option, especially one that just doesn't do much outside of shielding you when you already got Bennett to heal you already. Another problem that really frustrated me during my gameplay was that Scaramouche just really didn't want to attack the target I intend to attack. I found the auto-targeting system to be really clunky. Often I would be looking or staring at the enemy directly, maybe even standing in front of them directly. However, Scaramouche or Wander just decided to attack some enemy in the diagonal direction of the blue. It really just doesn't want to attack the enemy that I really want to attack. And that is a big problem, as Scaramouche, while he has okay amount of AoE capability, it doesn't really have the biggest AoE capability in his kit. While Scaramouche can get a good amount of AoE coverages by spamming his charge attack during his hover state, the problem is that instead of hitting the clump directly in front of him where the enemy are grouped up, I just really often found it just hitting some random enemy that is nowhere near the group, and therefore wasting all of his AoE potential. Not to mention, Wander partner in crime Faruzan doesn't have the greatest AoE grouping capability as well. When it comes down to discussing Scaramouche in a hyper carry position, we gotta talk about Faruzan as well, because very often you're gonna include her into your party to allow you to do more anemo damage as well as shred anemo resistance. The problem with this character is that she's just so terrible and it's incredibly Constellation locked, and unless you have Constellation 6 on her, she's not really that great. The biggest problem with this character by far is that she's just so energy hungry. Even when you're running something like 300% energy recharge with multiple Phonius weapon in your party with 2 anemo characters, Scaramouche and Faruzan, you are still not going to be able to reliably get your elemental burst back, which is really essential when it comes down to boosting Scaramouche damage. Not to mention that this character is just so clunky to play. Her elemental skill does the exact same thing as Kujosara, where it buffers your next charge attack to be faster as well as it have a special effect, which is actually how you get the grouping on these characters. And you remember how people were super complaining about how Sara was clunky already because you have to do this charge attack thing? Well, MiHoYo decided to listen to that feedback and do it once again, except you don't get the constellation of instantly proccing it, and this grouping is rather essential even though it is really small. I think having to include the knockoff Hatsune Miku into your party definitely add a huge amount of frustration when it comes down to playing Scaramouche, and overall just make playing hyper carry Scaramouche a really frustrating playstyles, even though it is the intended playstyles for Scaramouche. But what about his other playstyles? What about using him as a regular anemo driver, such as in the Taser team and Hyper Bloom team? As Scaramouche is a anemo character, you can simply equip the 4-piece VP set on him and use him as a anemo driver slash support for the rest of your party. And to be honest, this playstyle does work really well. Moving away from the Wander hyper carry playstyles definitely improved my experience with him a lot by putting him into other team like Tasers, Hyper Bloom, or even National team by giving him really strong teammate that actually fixes what he need to do. It honestly was just so much better. Taking a look at the Taser team, when we include a character like Beidou or Sing Shields, these characters can provide him with massive survivability like shield, heal, or even more importantly, interrupt resistance, which is what he really needs. The only real problem coming to most of these teams is that at this point, you're only slotting in Wander because he's a anemo character, rather than because he is Wander and because the thing he does is cool. And he isn't really any different from other anemo characters that I can slot in, such as Sucrose or Hazel as a anemo driver or even as a support. You could even argue that sometimes he might make your team a little worse, such as in the case of Hyper Bloom, he could potentially steal Hyper Bloom away from your Raiden or your Kuki and therefore loses you damage instead. But for the most part, most of these playstyles are definitely fine. They are kind of carried by teammate playstyles, but that's one of the biggest benefit of being a Nemo is that, well, you could just always go for the 4-piece VV artifact. So at the very least, he is relatively okay there. Truth to be told is that maybe I did set myself too high of an expectation, which is why I end up being really disappointed. When he was first debuted in 1.1 in his Electro form, he was definitely a really cool looking character, and now with him switching from Electro for Anemo for no reason, I expected him to be at least strong, since Anemo is a really strong element, and in the end I kind of got neither. I kind of personally preferred his Electro form rather than his Anemo form because maybe he'll be cooler, maybe he'll have a better kit, maybe he'll be an actual DPS, because now he's kind of like nothing, and that's really where my frustration is coming from. Playing hyper carry Scaramouche, which is the playstyle that he's intended for, and the playstyle that most people want, honestly just isn't that great from my first impression experience and often feel really frustrating to play. As always, I want to focus first impression video on only the character's kit and design and talk about if they have any built-in problem, in which case you can see Scaramouche does have a few built-in problem. And of course, next week we will talk about numbers, how is his damage, how this is compared to other peers in the Genshin Impact meta. Again, if you're not subscribed already, stay subscribed for that upcoming follow-up video where we kind of go a little bit harsher on the characters and talk about his actual meta values. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this video didn't disappoint too many people. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next time.